Hello everybody, I'm Roger. Thank you for watching. In this video and final video on chapter 6 from that tonal harmony textbook, they go over the deceptive progression at the very end of that chapter. Now the dominant triad typically resolves to the tonic triad, the 1 chord. But sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it resolves deceptively to the 6th chord, the submediant triad. But the voice leading does introduce something that you may find uncomfortable, all right? Because when 5 moves to 6, very often what you're going to have to do is not double the chordal root of the 6th chord. Up to this point, you've been very diligent in doubling chordal roots for root position triads, all right? But that was a tendency, right? That word tends is an important word. It is not always, it is not a rule, it is not an absolute, it is just a tendency. That's what composers tended to do when they wrote root position chords. They tended to emphasize the chordal root, but they don't when it resolves to 6, or they typically don't when it resolves to 6. And there's a reason why, and we'll talk about that in a moment, why I can't double the chordal root when 5 moves to 6. Well, first let me just go about this in a typical way, thinking like, okay, the roots are moving by second, right? And what we learned in earlier videos is when we have 2 successive chords where the root relationships are a second apart, I move those upper 3 voices in contrary motion to the bass. But that will not work in this example. Now, if I applied the same principles of moving the upper 3 voices in contrary motion to the bass, I will commit a great atrocity. I have made an error, okay? I have done something that is, okay, well, I don't want to overdo it. I have committed a voice leading faux pas. All right, the leading tone, which is in the soprano voice and exposed, is not resolving up, but it needs to, right? But how am I going to do that and still double the chordal root? Well, I can't, is what we'll find. All right, when the leading tone is exposed in the soprano voice like that, it's going to resolve up by step. This will result in a doubled chordal third for the 6th chord, doubled chordal third. Now, it's important to remember that this is only a part of the deceptive progression, which is 5 to 6, okay? This doesn't mean that every 6th chord is going to have a doubled chordal third, as we saw in earlier examples when 1 moved to 6, for example, right? We didn't have to worry about the doubled chordal third because that wasn't a deceptive progression. The deceptive progression is very specific. It needs to be 5 to 6. 1 to 6 isn't a deceptive progression, okay? So this is 5 to 6. And part of the problem is that leading tone, right? It needs to resolve up by step. Now, if we try to navigate this another way, let's see. If I do this, right? Okay, well, we can resolve the leading tone up by step, and then I just have to move D up to E and the A up to B. But of course, now I have all sorts of parallel problems, right? Parallel perfect fifths and parallel perfect octaves, right? Parallel fifths in the lower 2 voices and parallel octaves between the bass and the alto. So I can't get that doubled chordal root. So the only way to handle this chord properly without having those parallels and while also resolving the leading tone is to resolve the leading tone up by step, then move those remaining 2 voices in contrary motion to the bass. And that's the way you can think of it, okay? Is that you can still apply that principle that we learned earlier when chordal roots move by step between 2 triads, 2 successive triads, when we move the upper voices in contrary motion to the bass. We're still doing that, just not with the leading tone. The leading tone is not going to move down. It is going to move up to G, all right? And that is going to result in this doubled chordal third for the 6th chord. You should do this every time if you want to play it safe, okay? You don't have to. There are ways to resolve this accidentally, which we'll go over in a second. But just to reiterate, whenever you have 5 to 6, what you want to do first is resolve leading tone up by step, then move the remaining 2 voices in contrary motion to the bass. All right? I just want to emphasize this as much as possible. First, resolve the leading tone up by step. Doesn't matter if it's in the soprano, alto, or tenor, even though that's a lie. Just do it, okay? Resolve the leading tone up by step, then move the remaining two voices in contrary motion to the bass. That will result in the proper voice leading for this particular idiom every time when it's in isolation like this, when there's no surrounding context. You will get it right every time, and you will end up with that doubled chordal third. You will resolve the leading tone properly. You will not have parallel perfect fifths. You will not have parallel perfect octaves. As long as you resolve the leading tone up by step, it doesn't matter what voice it's in, just do it. And move the remaining two voices in contrary motion to the bass, and you're good. Remember that, okay? Now I'm going to go on and make your head explode, and so if you don't want to watch the rest of this, please turn it off now, okay? Because I'm going to get into some more details that are a little bit, well, it might stretch your brain a little bit. That's okay. Now, I might have mentioned earlier, depending on how I edit this video, that sometimes students will resolve this progression properly by accident. And what I mean by that is in a given voice leading exercise, they might encounter a deceptive progression like 5 to 6, but their leading tone isn't in the soprano, okay? They'll encounter a situation like this, where 5 is moving to 6, but the voicing of the 5 chord ends up being different than what I did over here, where the leading tone isn't in the soprano. Again, just to remind you, you don't have to watch the rest of this. You could go back and just tune this out and just focus on the earlier part of this video. But if you want to go for more, and honestly, who wouldn't want to go for more, then listen to the rest of this, okay? But a lot of my students will resolve this by accident. They'll move the upper three voices in contrary motion to the bass because they're trying to be a good person. And they notice that their root relationship here is by second, and they go, oh, I know Dr. Peterson, he gets so happy when I move the upper three voices in contrary motion to the bass, and yay, I did it. And you might be saying, but the leading tone didn't resolve up, right? But it's in an inner voice, and so it actually can go down here. And so here is a possibility where you don't have to double the chordal third for the sixth chord, because that leading tone is in an inner voice, right? It's moving from F sharp down to E, and it's hidden, it's masked in inner voice, and it doesn't need to go up to the G. Now that being said, you can just go back to earlier in the video and listen to what I said, right? Resolve the leading tone up by step. That means that F sharp will go up to G. When two voices converge on the same pitch, that's absolutely fine. Don't be afraid of that. And then the other two voices can move in contrary motion. Just what I said earlier. This is also correct. Perfectly wonderful. The leading tone is resolving up by step. Then the other two voices are moving in contrary motion to the bass. I've got that doubled chordal third. Again, this will work every time. All right? So you don't have to know about all these exceptions. Just resolve that leading tone up by step, then move those remaining two voices contrary motion to the bass. You'll get that doubled chordal third. You'll resolve the leading tone properly, and you won't have any of those parallel octaves or fifths. So the reason why this might get more complicated is because if I switch to G minor, for example, and do what I did a moment ago by not resolving the leading tone up by step, let's switch to G minor here. G minor. All right. Well, this doesn't work in a minor key. It worked in the major key, right? F sharp was moving down to E. But what's happening now? F sharp isn't moving to E. Look at the key signature. Or don't look at the key signature. It's not very nice. It doesn't look so good. All right, it's marginally better. Okay, so the F sharp is not moving to E anymore. It's moving to E flat. What is that melodic interval? Number 2 over there. It's that augmented second, isn't it? Oh, no. Yeah, so there's another potential error that can happen if you're not aware of how to handle this deceptive progression. Again, you can avoid this augmented second, if you just remember to resolve that leading tone up by step, and then move the remaining two voices in contrary motion to the bass, the A moving down to G, the D moving down to B flat. That will give you the doubled chordal third. You'll avoid those augmented seconds, and you won't have to worry about all the various permutations of 5 going to 6, right? You can just follow those voice leading guidelines, and you'll get it right every time in this sort of isolated context, 5 to 6, without any chords on either end of it. And it will work every time. But if you're feeling bold and you want to expand your knowledge a little bit, you can also recognize that in a major key, I'll change it back again, when the leading tone's in an inner voice, just like when we had 5 to 1, we learned that the leading tone doesn't have to resolve up if it's in an inner voice. We can move it down by step. We don't get that augmented second anymore, and we can have that doubled chordal root. So there's two possibilities in a major key when the leading tone's in an inner voice like this. You can move it up to G and have that doubled chordal third, or it can move down like this. Now, my students sometimes will do this in the context of a larger part writing exercise, and they're doing it by accident. They don't realize that when I put the leading tone in a soprano voice as part of this deceptive progression for their exam, they will often fall into the trap of not resolving that leading tone up and not doubling the chordal third, even though I try my best. Okay. Anyways, so like I said, you don't have to remember any of this extra stuff if you don't want to. You can just go back to this and realize that no matter where the leading tone is, no matter if you're in a major key or in a minor key, and you're dealing with this deceptive progression, you can always just resolve the leading tone up by step and move those remaining two voices in contrary motion to the bass. That is all for Chapter 6, and with root position, part writing in 4 voices. I hope these videos were helpful and informative. Thank you very much for watching.